Is this the season where we can definitively say the Championship is a better league than the Premier League?
It's much more fun. It's much more entertaining. It's better as a fan.
God, I hate VAR. I hope they never bring it into the Championship.
As a match-going fan, when you're there in a stadium, it's horrendous.
Hello guys, welcome to the Sportsman Untitled. This week we're going to have a look at Leeds United's dodgy away form. We're going to do a deep dive into Burnley, and we're also going to look at who Hull City could appoint as their next manager. This week I'm joined by Gab Sutton as always, and our special guest for today is Joe from Turfcast, Burnley fan channel. Joe, how are you getting on?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you? You all right?
Very, very good. Gab, let's get into it straight away. Blackburn won, Leeds 0 this weekend. Another away defeat for Leeds in terms of on a lunchtime on telly. They seem to be struggling. Why is this?
I think there's a massive issue that Leeds United have in terms of away games, because at home they often come up against deep defensive blocks, which is where their centre-half, Strike and Roden, have a lot of time and space on the ball and they can really dictate things. When they face a high press or a mid-block, if you like to use the modern technical terms, it can be a lot more difficult. So what I've got here is this. You might be able to see there's kind of a red line for the line of engagement that when they played QPR a couple of weeks ago, and it's basically on the halfway line. Whereas on Saturday, the line of engagement from Blackburn Rovers was sort of on the edge of the final third. And as you might be able to make out, it's much harder, I think, for the centre halves when they've got three men between themselves and the two central midfielders to really play and dictate in the way that they do at Elland Road. So that's where I think Leeds United need number 6, because they're missing Ethan Ampadu at the moment. I think that's a big loss away from home. Not so much at home, because that's where the centre halves can be the number 6 a little bit in possession. But I think at home they need a midfielder that's going to demand the ball off the defence and always give them an option, like a Matt Grimes at Swansea kind of player. I think that's what they're missing at the moment. So as soon as Ethan Ampadu's back, especially away from home, I think he goes straight back in.
Joe, you must have been quite happy to see them lose this weekend to Blackburn. Well, actually, I don't know.
Yeah,
actually,
no.
It's Blackburn, isn't it?
It's one of them where you don't know what you want from the match, other than maybe like 6 red cards and a 0-0, something like that.
I just hope both teams lose.
Yeah, basically, yeah, that Simpsons thing. I just hope both teams lose. Yeah, it were an awkward one. I'll never be happy that they've won a football match, but if it comes to the end of the season and we've managed to get in second or first by 1 point, then yeah, I might buy one of them a pint somewhere.
And do you think it's as simple as Ampadu being out, and when he comes back, it's fixed, Gab? Is it as simple as that?
I think that makes a massive difference, because if you've got a 3-man press and you've got 2 centre halves because your fullbacks are really high up the pitch, it becomes very difficult if neither of your centre midfielders are dropping in and really giving you that option. So I think it becomes a lot harder for Strike and Roden. Whereas I think you put Ampadu in the situation that, say, Joe Rothwell was in or Tanaka was in, I think he's absolutely determined to help out the defenders in possession and give them that other option and then progress the ball up the pitch. So away from home, I feel like that's what they're missing.
And we have to give some credit to Blackburn. 3 wins in a row, I think that is...
Oh, well, do you know what? I love the job that John Eustace... Joe, cover your ears. I'm going to praise Blackburn here. I love the job John Eustace is doing, because going into the season, there was a lot of apathy around Ewood Park. Fans were almost more focused on what was going on off the pitch than what was going on it. And John Eustace has brought everyone together, not just the fan base, which was difficult enough in itself in the circumstances, but also getting players to buy into what he wants against the ball. So this 3-man press that I've detailed from Blackburn Rovers, Todd Cantwell was part of that. And Todd Cantwell is a footballer that previously you'd associated with being a little bit enigmatic, a bit of a luxury player. We know how good he is on the ball and the flair and unpredictability that he can bring. But he's buying into what John Eustace wants. And I think for him to do that, I think speaks to excellent man management, people skills from John Eustace. Clearly a very honest person and clearly very down to earth, and that makes an impact on people, both fans and players alike.
I don't want to disrespect Blackburn almost, but it would be good to see him given maybe a bigger job somewhere along the line. I know he was under consideration from the commentary board to try and give him the job, but I mean, you want him out there as quickly as possible.
Well, to be fair, I do agree with Gabby. He's done a good job, but I think he's the perfect manager for the situation that they're in at the minute. But if you look at what he did at Birmingham as well and the circumstances surrounding letting him go and their pitfall after it, I think that shows how good of a manager he actually is. And yeah, that's as much as you'll get from me in terms of praising Blackburn. But in terms of Eustace, I do agree. I do think he's a good manager. And I remember when they appointed him at the time, I remember thinking, that's a shame, he's a good manager. I think he'll do all right there.
And he certainly has done that. What do you make of the title rivals for Burnley so far? Sheffield United now top, beating Sunderland, both of them in the mix at the minute.
Yeah, I think Sheffield United, I mean, I got a bit of stick recently. I said it to a Leeds fan, to be fair, so that's probably why, but I got a bit of stick recently, like saying I think at the minute, Sheffield United are the team that worry me the most. Got to remember they had like a 2-point deduction at the start of the season. If you add that 2 points on top there, there's a gap starting to appear, but I do think it's going to be a 3 or a 4, depending on if Sunderland can turn their form around, teams that do start to pull away from the rest of the pack, and that'll be Burnley, Sheffield United and Leeds, and maybe Sunderland as well. So I'm happy, obviously, that Leeds are stuttering, but Sheffield United's form is worrying me at the minute, and I think they've got a really good squad, Sheffield United. Leeds have got a good squad as well, but they're stuttering, and every time I watch Sheffield United, it's a professional performance, 2-0 win, job done, move on to the next game, win, job done, move on to the next game, and they're just quietly going about the business.
They've certainly got a lot of quality in that squad. And don't worry, we will come on to Burnley in part 2. We'll do a deep dive on them. Sunderland, Gab, you are kind of our Sunderland representative, anointed, given you predicted them to have a good season. They're still having a good season, but no wins in 6 now for Sunderland. Obviously, a few injury issues we have talked about. Yeah. Is it all down to injuries? I mean, they didn't do badly at Bramall Lane, but they lost the game.
I thought they played really well, actually. I thought they had the better of the chances on balance. Sheffield United probably came into it a lot more in the last 20 minutes, and they were clinical in their moments. Great moment for Tom Davis. Delighted for him. It's what football's all about, really, isn't it? But I thought, Joe Bellingham just exuded class on Friday night. Chris Rigg showed some lovely touches as well. Tommy Watson even coming in for Remain at Mundell, since he's sort of been out of the team due to injury. Watson, I thought, had some great moments. So yeah, I think it was a game of nearlies for Sunderland, and actually I think they were the better team at the time of Chris Mepham's silly challenge. It was just a momentary lapse in concentration. They were very much with the foot on the accelerator at the time. The red card kind of changed the dynamics of the game, and it became a bit more of a basketball game after Harry Souttar was sent off for Sheffield United. But very much a competitive performance from Sunderland. They deserved at least a point at Bramall Lane. They've got some big players back fit. They played very well against West Brom in midweek as well. I'm very confident that they'll, with the fixtures ahead of them, I think they'll put that winless run to an end very quickly.
Brilliant stuff. I'll have to wait and see on them. There's a bit of a quirk in the Championship at the moment. I'll get your view on this, Joe. West Brom, 9 draws in their last 10 games. What on earth's going on? Can Carlos Corberán sort this? He's one of the best managers in the league, but they can't stop drawing games.
That's what I was going to say. If you want a manager to be able to sort it, it's Carlos Corberán. I do agree, he's probably the best or one of the best managers in the league. So it's bizarre as well, because we played them recently, and obviously that was a draw as well. So I don't really understand what's going on. Obviously, Gav's the expert. He might know more of me on the specifics of it and what's happening at West Brom. But it is a bit of an anomaly, and it's bizarre to see every time I check the result. I'm like, another draw. It is bizarre.
Gab?
I think I definitely think it's a squad that needs freshening up in January. I think Carlan Grant's sort of taken on a bit of the goal-scoring mantle that Josh Madger seems to have sort of vacated recently, and he's carried a bit more of a threat. But yeah, I think it's a squad that needs a bit of freshening up. But I do still trust Carlos Corberán to get it right. I don't think they're too far away.
It's an interesting one. If they keep drawing games, they're going to fall out of the mix quite quickly. We missed out on talking about Hull sacking Tim Walter, because that only happened last weekend. They lost this weekend away at Middlesbrough. Gab, who do you want to see go in at Hull, and was it the right decision for Walter to leave?
I can see why they came to that decision. I think it was getting to a very difficult situation for Tim Walter. I think when Aja Nilajela has gone abroad for the appointments, Shotta Arveladze initially, and now Tim Walter, it hasn't quite worked out. Whereas I think when they appointed Liam Rosenior, that was an in-season appointment, and that was with somebody who has a bit of a knowledge of the Championship. And I think in Hull's situation, where it has to be taken very seriously that they are in a relegation battle, I think you want someone with a bit of a knowledge of the division and someone who can settle in quickly, because that's what the job needs.
It's a difficult job to kind of walk into. It feels like they kind of turn their direction whichever manager comes in. Have you got any thoughts on Hull or ideas for managers you'd like to see come in? I'm going to come on to Mark Robbins, who has been linked with the job as well.
That's who I was going to... He would be perfect, I think, for them. He's a very good Championship manager, but I think from Robin's perspective, he might want something, again, no disrespect to Hull, they're a decent club, but I think he's done a very good job at Coventry. I think he deserves maybe somebody knocking on the door of the Premier League, does Robins, but I think he would be perfect for them. Like you said, you need somebody who knows the Championship, and he knows the Championship very, very well.
I think with Mark Robins at Coventry, and you might be able to speak to this, Simon, he kind of had a lot of, certainly during Joyce Apala's reign, got a lot of things wrong, Zizou, of course, but they did give Mark Robins the space to run the club as he wanted, and he did have a lot of operational autonomy at Coventry City, whereas I think at Hull City that wouldn't be so much the case, because they have got people there that do sort of involve themselves a little bit more, and so I think that would bring its own challenges, possibly. I wonder if Hull will probably want a bit more of a head coach, and conversely, I actually think for Mark Robins, he spent 7 years at one club, done incredible work, but it's been such a demanding job where he's been involved in the day-to-day running of the club. Actually, I think if I was in his shoes, I would think, let's have a bit of time out, let's rest, reflect, let's sort of study different cultures, different teams, and have a bit of a sabbatical, because I think that would serve him well in his next job, maybe in a year's time.
100%. He looked really refreshed when we saw him 2 weeks after his sacking, when he got the award from the university. I really don't want him to take the whole job. I think it can go wrong so quickly there for any manager. I mean, you saw how they treated Rosino, who'd done a really good job, I think. I think the only job that I think would tempt him maybe is the Luton job. And we bring it up all the time, but at the moment they're sticking loyal to Rob Edwards, which I think is a pretty good decision as well, because I think they are a club who would kind of give him a bit of time, let him have a few years, which is what he needs. But I think it's going to hurt a lot seeing him in another Championship dugout, so maybe you should just leave it there and call it a day. And
what about Alex?
Some time off.
So what about Alex Neil, Simon?
Yes.
Good Championship manager.
Experience.
You know, I think he's the kind of manager I'd want to look at bringing in that situation, because I think he could serve a short-term purpose, but he's only 43. I think he's the sort of person who could grow with the club as well. I still think he's got some potential as a manager, delivered pretty consistently other than at Stoke over the last 10 years or so in management in England. So
Ryan Lowe, Stephen Schumacher. I mean, there's managers with a bit of Championship experience who could do a job. It's going to be a really interesting one. I hope Hull don't go into the kind of Cardiff cycle where they've kind of left it. I think it's like 80 days now since they sacked Treble. I think they need to get an appointment in fairly soon and start working their way up the table. We're coming in now to the busy Christmas period. We know there's so many games lined up. How do you think Burnley are going to handle this Christmas period, and how do you think other teams at the top are going to handle it?
Well, obviously I can only speak for Burnley, but I was just looking at our fixtures on the way in, and we have a very, very, very tough December. So we have to play Middlesbrough twice. We've got to go to Norwich. We've got to go to Sheffield United. We've got Derby at home, and I'm missing another fixture. But we've got a very tough run of fixtures over this festive period. And then obviously there's a Stoke New Year's Day, and then Blackburn away on I think it's the 4th of January. So we've got a tough December and a tough festive period. So I think when we look at the table on the 5th, 6th of January, we'll know where Burnley are as a side. I think we've just started to come good after a few dodgy results and a couple of defeats. We deserved to lose both of them games, but one was at Sunderland, so you're like, that's fair enough, they're a decent side. To be fair, one was at Millwall, and they're a decent side as well. But we'd need to see where we are come the end of this run, but we're going into it in a bit of form, so I think we'll handle it quite well. I was looking at December, like I said, we've got 6 games, and I'd be happy with 10 points.
Fair enough. It's kind of hard to judge, but if we make it maybe the top 4 at the moment, Gab, out of those, who do you think's got kind of the strongest squad to deal with these fixtures?
I mean, Burnley have got 33 players or something along those lines. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, you've certainly got
exactly.
a lot of options. I think Leeds, we've spoken about their depth as well, especially when they bring some of those players that we've mentioned back, like Ampadu and Gruev. So that's going to make a difference for them. But you know what? I think Joe mentioned it earlier that there's a kind of a group of 4 leading contenders for automatic promotion, but I think there's a sort of a caveat where it could become 5 depending on how Middlesbrough do, because I think I'm curious to see, and we'll come on to Burnley in the second section, in terms of how they can do against some of the top sides, especially from a creative point of view, but whether Middlesbrough can keep their clinical edge that we've seen from them in the last month or so against sides like Burnley and against Norwich and other sides in the league. I think that's going to tell us a lot about whether Middlesbrough can actually become part of that equation.
I was big on Middlesbrough last week, wasn't I, Gab? And I'm still very confident they could get into the mix. I mean, the big game coming on Friday night, and we'll preview that later on in the show as well. But I'm big on Michael Carrick. I'm big on Borough. I think they can do really well this season. With how tight the table is at both ends, and I'm a big advocate of the Championship, but Joe, you can answer this better than most with Burnley. Is this the season where we can definitively say the Championship is a better league than the Premier League?
I mean, I've been saying that for 4 or 5 seasons now. All right, it doesn't help that every time we're in the Premier League, we don't tend to do very well. The last few times we've been in the Premier League, we don't tend to do very well. Obviously, we did finish 7th and finish in the top 10 twice under Sean Dyche, but as a team that's either at the bottom of the Premier League or at the top of the Championship, which is where we tend to be at the minute, it's so much better. It's so much more fun. Like, I've got a little boy, and I started taking him on away games last season. Well, more home games last season, but a couple of away games. This season, he goes on away games, and he's got his first ever season ticket. Last season, I was saying to him, do you want to come on turf? He's like, no, we'll get beat. Like, yeah, you probably will get beat, but that's not what it's about. He's like, no, I'll just rather play my Xbox. I'm like, fair enough. Whereas this season, he's like waking up in the morning, and he's like, we went Stoke away at the weekend, and he's like, oh, what time are we setting off to Stoke? And it's much more fun. It's much more entertaining. It's better as a fan. I mean, I'm sure Plymouth fans travelling to Norwich and wherever and getting, battered 6-1 or whatever it was, 6-0 might disagree, but it's much more fun, it's much more entertaining, and there's not the top 6 cartel or the top 7, top 8 cartel like it is in the Premier League now. So yeah, it's anyone can beat anyone, and yeah, it's much more entertaining as a fan, 100%.
And we look at things in the Premier League like ticket prices and VAR. I mean, Southampton had a great season last year, a really memorable season, ended in that win over Leeds at Wembley. This weekend, they had a goal wrongly disallowed by VAR, and everyone's just moaning about that. It's boring, isn't it?
Oh, I hate VAR. I hope they never bring it into the Championship.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. It's terrible, and I think it really ruins the spectacle.
It does. Even as when you're there in the stadium, it's just sometimes they don't. I think they've improved it recently, but sometimes you don't know what's going on. It's just the referee's there, his hand in the air, and you're like, well, what's he checking? I don't understand. And I remember we played Villa on New Year's Day 2 or 3 seasons ago, and Villa had a goal disallowed because as one of their players is walking back, his heel is offside. And even as Burnley fans, we'll sat there like, I mean, we'll take it, but that should 100% be a goal. And they've got too specific with it, like stuff like that, just leave it. And there's so many grey areas as well surrounding it, like when he's got a fingernail offside as well. I know some people will just say, well, offside is offside, and fair enough, but we should change the rules slightly. But then it's difficult. What do you change it to? I respect that, but yeah, it's as a match-going fan, when you're there in a stadium, it's horrendous. And sometimes, like I said, I've used the example of Villa, you'll see an opposition team get a goal disallowed against you, and you're thinking, yeah, I feel sorry for you, to be fair.
I was watching a Premier League years from I think it was 14-15 or 13-14 the other day, and you just think, look at all these goals, and look at the fans celebrating because they know it's a goal, and that's what you have in the Championship. And I think you can't lose that. And I think in the Premier League, the Premier League product is going downhill rapidly for me. Let's move on to Burnley, right? Because we've skirted around them for a bit, but it's time to get a deep dive into them. I've been critical of Scott Parker this season. I think Gab's had his concerns as well. Joe, from your point of view, does Parker have what it takes to get this side promoted?
Yes. I think Parker deserves a lot of credit. I think even our own fans, so it's not just yourselves and other podcasts and stuff like that and pundits, even our own fans have been quite critical of him, and I've tried to defend him. I think when you look at what's happened to Burnley, like before that Sunderland match, Parker had the rug pulled from underneath him. He had a lot of players sold, players refusing to play that game, and then obviously we still put in a okay performance. We didn't get battered by Sunderland. I think it was only 1-0 in the end. And to turn that around and to be in the position that we're in now, all right, Leeds' little slumping form has helped that slightly, but you can only beat what's put in front of you. We've just won 4 games in a row. I can't remember the last time we conceded a goal. We've conceded 6 goals, I think it is, all season. Can't remember the exact stats on clean sheets, but I think it's something like 12, 13. And he's done a very good job. And some people don't like him because of his style of play, and that's fair enough. But I think as a manager, he's a good manager, and I think he's starting to turn it around now. We're starting to finally see Burnley play in his style, which is not just pass it round the back. There's elements to that, but it's a case of trying to invite players on and things like that. And the first few games, we had a lot of games at home and a lot of draws where it was hard work and it was tough to watch. But it wasn't helping that teams like Preston, who else did it? I think Blackburn did it, Oxford did it, Portsmouth did it. And they just come and they just sit back and they say, break us down. All right, the onus is on us to break them down. And Burnley under Vincent Kompany would have beat every single one of them sides 3-0. But a nice stat I always like to go to, which Burnley fans hate me for using because I can't use it for the rest of the season, is at this stage of the season, we are better off in terms of points than what we were under Vincent Kompany. We had a slow start under Vincent Kompany as well. We drew at home to Luton, okay, that ended up being an okay result. They ended up getting promoted. Drew at home to Stoke, Blackpool as well. We had so many bad draws at home, and it's just the same with Scott Parker. The only difference is with Scott Parker is it's not as entertaining. But I'm one of them fans. I go on the Burnley match, I go on the turf not to be entertained. I go on the turf to watch Burnley win. When I watch other football on the telly, when I'm watching Liverpool City, entertain me, that's what I'm there for. The turf is about results. It's good when it's results and entertainment, don't get me wrong, but now, that the Coventry game, for example, sorry to use that example, but in that second half, we played very, very well. First half was pretty poor because, again, Coventry were just saying, come and break us down, and we couldn't do it. Second half, the early goal helped, and then Coventry had to come out a little bit, and then we finished it off. Stoke, first half, again, not great, but second half game against Stoke, that second half performance, that's exactly how I want Burnley to play. Strong at the back, going forward with numbers, that's helped. I think that's why we've changed around a lot recently, is because we started throwing more bodies forward. And that's exactly how I wanted us to play. And people were leaving Stoke the other day saying, this is a great performance, brilliant, love it. And it were. I genuinely feel like we've turned a corner. Like I said already, I've alluded to it already, we've got a tough December. We'll see how we look then. But I think for now, I'm happy with where we are.
Gab, thoughts on Parker at this point? Because Burnley are way above where I thought they'd be at this point in the season.
I've got to give Scott Parker some credit for the last few games. He's to some extent averted a few of my concerns from up to the season so far in terms of the creativity. I actually put a tweet out asking Burnley fans for some thoughts on the recent improvements in terms of these new layers of creativity that they seem to have found in the last few games on top of that solid defensive base. I actually got 12, I've categorised it as 12 different answers, so that shows you the kind of variety of perspective, but I'll read out the kind of the big ones that have got the most kind of answers. Better balance without Josh Brownhill. Recognised centre forward Jay Rodriguez, knows his strongest 11, so Ryan pegs in round holes, and it's just taking a bit of time to gel. Any of those, I'm curious to ask Joe, really, any of those that really sort of stand out for you?
The main one for me is playing Jay Rodriguez as a striker. Right. We've been playing Zian Fleming, who's quite clearly a 10. He's not an out-and-out striker. I mean, to be fair, another thing as well I want to mention is the amount of injuries that Burnley have got. And I know it's always a bit of a cop-out, but Lyle Foster's injured, Zian Fleming has been injured for a while, Brownhill's injured, and we've got the long-term injuries to the likes of Ramsey, and Nathan Redmond's just come back, and Delcourt. So we have got a lot of injuries. So this is why we were playing square pegs in round holes. But recently, I mean, Jay Rodriguez has always been there, so that was quite a frustration from my side with Parker. Is we're now playing a 9 as a 9, and it helps you so much. Yeah, Jay might be in my school year. I think he was in the school year below me, so I think he's 35. Is Jay, and yes, he might not be able to do 3 games in a week, but he just did, to be fair. And in that first half, he was quite isolated. And I remember tweeting at half time to people saying, like, people going, "Oh, Jay's isolated. He's rubbish. I don't understand why people have been clambering to be in the team." Like, because he's a striker for a start, so we need a striker playing there. And he's done well in the last 2 games. And people saying, "Oh, I don't think he's done enough." And then obviously he scores really early on in that second half, and it just helps so much. I think the comment on Brownhill's a bit harsh. I do agree. I think it's harsh, but I also agree with it. But Brownhill also offers us a different dynamic. I think Brownhill, with Josh Brownhill, he sometimes gets played out of position. His best place is to be the furthest forward midfielder, whereas sometimes he's got to move back a little bit, and he's even been played in sort of like the DM role sometimes, and that just doesn't suit him at all.
Oh, really? I thought there's been games where Brownhill's played in the number 10 position.
Yeah, well, he has
struggled with.
He struggled with that as well this season, but again, I think that doesn't help with playing Zian Fleming in the 9. I think the fact that Zian's dropping and then Brownhill's also there. I prefer Brownhill as like a box-to-box, but I think at the minute, I do agree with at the minute, we've got such a good midfield at the minute. Cause
you got Medjbri, Joe, and Sarmiento, who
Cullen,
I think are better in the 10. Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Sarmiento was fantastic against Stoke. But I do struggle to see where Brownhill now fits into the side. As much as I do like him, and I think that Burnley fans give him a lot of unnecessary stick sometimes, but I do struggle to see where he fits into that side now, to be honest. It depends on the kind of game where we're playing. It'll be interesting to see what we do against Middlesbrough on Friday, but Josh Loren's come in, and I wasn't expecting much from Josh Loren, if I'm being honest with you, but he's come in and been fantastic. Josh Cullen was a Championship Player of the Season 2 years ago, and he won it at a canter. He was easily the best player, and that's a big reason as to why we've started playing well now recently, because Josh Cullen suddenly has started finding form, because he suddenly wants to get the ball on the half turn in that gap in between the defence and midfield, and then spray it out wide, spray it to the forwards, whereas recently he's been getting, well, in our poor form, he's been getting the ball with his back to our goal, sort of like the opposition goal, and then just passing it backwards.
Well, do you know what I love about Josh Laurent as well, Joe, from recent performances, is that he's made those third man runs, if you like, into the box. And I think previously there's been a case where maybe your two central midfielders have stayed quite deep and it's become a bit static, whereas I think if opposing sides have got to keep an eye on Josh Laurent getting to the back stick, all of a sudden it creates a bit more space, doesn't it, for a Sarmiento or a Medjugorje or a... One
of the things I've always said about Laurent is he drags us up the pitch, and that's how he does it, by making them runs. Even with the ball sometimes, he will get the ball and he'll just drag us 30, 40 yards up the pitch. And in them games that I've already referenced, like your Preston at home, your Portsmouth at home, your Blackburn at home, where the teams just want to sit back, that helps you so much, just being further up the pitch instead of just sitting in your own half and not knowing what to do. So Laurent's been for £500,000 as well. You know, absolutely fantastic. And Stoke fans, they were happy to lose him. And I found it absolutely... Obviously, we've just played Stoke at the weekend. He got a bit of stick and then he celebrated at the end and then he got even more stick. So I don't understand what they're complaining about. But yeah, for £500,000... I think that's the signing of the summer from Burnley. Absolutely fantastic. He's been brilliant.
I just love that all your midfielders are called Josh.
Yeah.
is that your signing?
Well, did you see the celebration at Sheffield Wednesday? You know the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other? So Josh Brown or Josh Cullen and Josh Laurent all just did that, all just pointing at each other. It was brilliant.
We have to come on to the defence as well, because 6 goals conceded in 18 games now so far. The record, Watford, in 2020-21 is 30 goals conceded over the entire season. And Burnley, if they keep going at this rate, are going to concede about 18 goals. This is like Chelsea Jose Mourinho stuff. So
they conceded 15 in 38,
which is maybe worse. I don't know. I can't do the comparison. Anyway, you've obviously got some very talented individuals. We talk about James Trafford in goal, future England #1 possibly. Maxime Estev, we think, is probably the best centre back in the Championship. Why are you so good at defending, and why aren't you conceding any goals?
You've mentioned the main 2 reasons there, and another one is CJ Egan-Riley. He's come in and he's just as good as, not just as good as Estev. That I'm getting a bit carried away there, but Estev is fantastic. Again, I don't know how much you saw of the Stoke game at the weekend, but Trafford didn't have too much to do, but when he's called upon, he did it well. And I'm glad you mentioned Trafford, because I was quite critical of Trafford last season, and I've said it on the podcast recently.
It's too big a jump from Joe.
That's what I said. Yeah. I just think at the time he's gone too high too soon, and I think he got found out last season in the Premier League, and I think Company should have dropped him earlier. Not to be critical of him, but to protect him. I don't think Company were protecting him, and they were flapping at crosses. And there was a goal at West Ham where he should have got his hand to it, and that's why I was criticising him. He's been fantastic this season as Trafford, and I know it's cool to hate Trafford, but from other fans as well. Similar like it is sometimes cool to hate Parker, but he deserves a lot of credit. Does James Trafford? I was watching him against Stoke at weekend, and he came out for a corner. The only reason why I mentioned this is I tried to do one of them TikTok vlogs. I don't know who I think I am. Tried to do one of them TikTok vlogs, and I remember filming it for a Stoke corner, and Trafford comes out and he punches it, and the guy behind me is like, catch it, and I'm like, this is what keepers do these days, they punch. And then he punched it, and he must have punched it around 30, 40 yards, fell to a Stoke player, crosses it in, the Trafford comes out and catches it, and then throws it out to Connor Roberts, and I'm thinking, well done, like, it is absolutely brilliant. So he deserves a lot of credit for where he's been this season. But yeah, completely agree. Maxime Esteve, in my opinion, is the best defender in the Championship, the best centre-back in the Championship. He's so strong. And again, he made a good block at the weekend against Stoke, preventing the goal. But these are the differences. I think, say, like if, I don't know, a team that's in and around us that's not part of the top, Middlesbrough, for example, if they go to Stoke and concede that chance that we conceded, they might concede a goal. And then obviously goals change games and the dynamic of the game changes completely. But it's been fantastic to see how good they are at the back, and it reminds me of the likes of James Tarkowski and Ben Mee and Nick Pope. I'm not saying they're as good as them, obviously, but it's like that. It's like watching Burnley with that solid base again, like we did under Dyche.
I think the other thing, Joe, is that consistency between Estev and CJ Egan-Riley, because they've played together regularly. Because when you look through the squad in the summer, there's about 8 different centre halves, and it felt as if
signed another one in Morrell.
and it felt as if any of them could play. But I think it's probably been the right thing that Parker settled on a combination, and they seem to be benefiting.
I mean, he's kind of been forced into that through injury, if I'm being honest. I don't want to give Parker too much credit for that one, because Worrell got injured and stuff, and CJ Egan-Riley's come in, and Worrell's on his way back from injury. I think he'll be back soon, and I'd be very disappointed to see CJ Egan-Riley drop now. He deserves a lot of credit.
He's been absolutely fantastic. Than Worrell, isn't he, really? As a ball player.
He will ping the ball diagonally. Like, he might not be as good a defender as strong as Worrell, but he's not come unstuck yet. He's been fantastic. He's not looked out of place. Like I said, he's looked just as strong as Esteve, but he will ping the ball out wide and get it to midfielders, whereas your Esteve and your Worrells are more like, big tackles, big headers sort of defenders.
I think if you look at it and you look at that three, you'd think they're three young guys, relatively inexperienced at championship level. But then that's where you've got the combination of someone like Connor Roberts at right back, who's played 40 million games. Josh Brownell, even in the team, his experience is unbelievable. I think if you look at some teams in the championship with young players who lack that experience, you need to blend them with the likes of Connor Roberts, even though he's not the sexiest footballer in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that Tash is pretty sexy. But last season in the Premier League, for example, like that were one of the problems. We had too much inexperience in there, and we went too early with the youngsters, and I think we had put too many youngsters in there too early. Whereas this year, I do feel like we found a nice balance. I do agree with that.
We've got to talk about Trafford because there's a little rumour going around that Spurs might be looking at him in January or in summer because Vicario's done his ankle in. I don't know how long he's out for, and Fraser Forster's their number 2. Would you see a move for him to the Premier League materialising that soon, or given what we saw last season, do you think it's too early still?
I still think it's too early. I think Trafford would want to go, though. I think Trafford is a very ambitious young man. There's nothing wrong with that. So I do think he would want to go. I think if they're going to sign him to stick him in and put him in as number 1, I think that'd be a mistake. I think wait till the summer and then potentially go to, I think, Newcastle. I think that just because they were looking at him earlier in the summer transfer window just gone. I think Newcastle will be a good move, especially with Pope sort of like at the wrong side of 30 now and probably deteriorating a little bit. But yeah, I think January will be too soon for Trafford. Despite everything I've just said, I think he's been fantastic, but it will be too soon.
Do you not think though, Joe, it will be a bit of a leap for him to go to us because Newcastle are going to have Champions League ambitions next season, and that's going to require a certain level of consistency in the Premier League. And Trafford's last into that level didn't go well. So is there not a case for him actually pacing himself a little bit more and walking in the right direction rather than running in the wrong one?
Potentially, like I said, I do think that's where he went wrong with us in the first season. I think it was too much too soon, too young. But yeah, I mean, it's whoever's interested in it. Due to his England ambitions and how well thought of he is in the England setup, you're going to see these bigger clubs who are in and around the Champions League wanting him because they know that in 10, 15 years, well, less than that, 5 years, they can make a huge profit on him, even if they buy him for giving us a profit, because we spent a lot of money on him, obviously. So we're going to want to make a profit. Then I think even then in another 5 years, I think the thought process there is one of the top clubs like City might want him back, for example, if they can finally sort their form out and then they make a profit on him. So I think these clubs are looking at him not necessarily for number 1 now, but for profit in a few years as well.
But I think for him, he's got to play, hasn't he? That's the point. I think I agree. I think staying at Burnley, and I think you can bring the comparison maybe with Jordan Pickford at Everton. I'd rather the England number 1 played for a club like Everton, when they're actually busy, when they're facing shots, when they're tested with crosses. If James Trafford's Man City's number 1, he's obviously he's a very good keeper with very good ambitions, but his minutes might drop down. He might not be that tested during games. I think he's got to definitely stay for the meantime, build his confidence up. Burnley might be a Premier League team this time, and then try again with Burnley in the Premier League this time next season.
Yeah, I think even if we went up, I think he'd want. I mean, I'm just guessing. I just feel like he's got bigger ambitions. Whether or not he matches them, I think he will. I've said several times I do think he will be England's number 1. I know you've just alluded to that, but yeah, I think for now, definitely the best decision is stay. Hopefully, he's got good people around him who are giving him good advice, because I do think that the last time he went too high too soon. So yeah, stay for now.
Can I ask you, Joe, what's your take on Luca Kogliosho's form this season? Because to me, he's really stood out, even when Burnley maybe haven't been at their most creative collectively. But there is also a point of view among some Burnley fans that his end product needs a bit of polishing. So
yeah.
What's your take on it?
I love Luca. He's probably was my favourite player at the start of the season. I think I've changed now to Maxime Esteve. But yeah, I love Luca. I would like to see Luca maybe giving a run out of the team for a little bit. Maybe we try something different there. But I'm not, again, and there's not many people who can come in for him. But that is the perfect thing. what I like about Luca is no matter how bad his form has been recently with the end product, is he still wants the ball. He's still trying to get involved. He's still trying to make things happen. Somebody said a brilliant quote, and I've used it on pretty much every single podcast ever since, is that Luca Koleosho could find a dead end on a motorway. And that's the problem. Like, he'll beat his man, and then he comes back in and then loses the ball and then just gets crowded out. That's his problem, but that comes with inexperience. I think because he's so young, as he gets better, the end product will get better.
Do you know what, though? I also think that if you put Luca Koleosho, I know he's played on the left for Burnley, but you put him in the same position that somebody like Zerori or Benson had played in the company season, title-winning one, I think he would have got a similar level of productivity because the volume of possession he had in the final third have been so high, and you've got fullbacks constantly overlapping you've got midfielders constantly making runs, and there's a lot more attacking impetus in the team, albeit that's improved a bit more recently. And you wouldn't notice him being a bit wasteful, whereas I think there's been times this season where, because Burnley haven't had that, there's been more attention drawn to, like, you've got to be more clinical, I guess, as an individual. So that's where I would kind of defend Koleosho a bit. I'm not saying he's the finished article, but I think he's had a very good season so far.
Going to bring us on to the Friday night fixture, Burnley versus Middlesbrough. We've touched on it already. Gab, we said this could be a potential playoff match at the end of the season. Middlesbrough's unbelievable attack in terms of chance creation, Burnley's solid as a rock defence. I mean, how does this one go?
I'm so excited for that one. It's I think there's a cliche that
immovable object, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So excited. Massive test for Middlesbrough in terms of whether they can continue that the rate of clinical final third play that we've seen from them in the last few weeks, a little bit in contrast to how they've been for much of the season so far, where they haven't always been able to convert their chances. The last month or so they really have. This is a test as to whether they can do that against the big teams. Similarly, I think it's a massive test for Burnley. Can they start to continue this blueprint that we've seen from them in terms of creating a few more chances and looking a bit better going forward? Can they replicate that and model that against one of the better teams? I think it's a massive test for both sides. So you know where I'll be on Friday night.
On the fence, is it?
No, that's at Oxford.
Yeah. Joe, in terms of Middlesbrough, you've talked about Burnley struggling to break teams down who sit in. Middlesbrough aren't going to sit in. They're going to come out and try and score goals because that's what they do best. Is that working in Burnley's benefit then?
I don't know. I'm worried about this game because I'm not worried about our back line, but as you've just said, it's the biggest test our back line will face so far this season. Like I said, we've got a massive December, so obviously we're playing Sheffield United as well soon, so that'll be another test. But if we can keep a clean sheet against, are they the second highest scorers now in the Championship? I think Norwich overtook them at the weekend. Then that just shows how good the defence is. I think you're going to see more attacking from Burnley in this one, simply because Middlesbrough will be doing that, and then it's going to leave gaps, and hopefully the midfield is going to be massive. I know the midfield's massive in every game, but I think more so in this game. If Josh Cullen can get on the ball more and get it out to the more creative players, then we stand a chance, because Middlesbrough, as we've said, will be attacking a bit more, because obviously that's where they're dangerous. So yeah, I agree. It's going to be a good game. I don't know if it's going to end up being high scoring or just carrying on being what Burnley's games have been all season, which is under 2.5. I don't know what the stats are, but I think if you put under 2.5 on every single Burnley game so far this season, you'd probably be buying a house somewhere now. But yeah, it's going to be a good game. I'm really looking forward to it, but it's a massive test for our defence. Massive test.
I'm going to come to both of you for a score prediction. I'm not letting you sit on the fence or say it's going to be low scoring. I want a score prediction. Joe, who's come to you first?
I think we'll have enough, hopefully. I do think Middlesbrough will score, though, but I can't see him scoring more than one. Recently I've said to other podcasters on the channel that you'll do well to score, and I stand by that even with Middlesbrough, but I think Middlesbrough are one of them teams that can score. Stoke nearly got a couple at the weekend. I think if Middlesbrough get one of the chances that Stoke had, they have the better strikers, they'll probably put it in the back of the net. But I still think we have enough. I'm going to go 2-1 Burnley.
I think Parker's going to come up with a very specific, tailored plan to negate Middlesbrough's right side, because I think they've not got as much of a threat on their left, and I think Parker's the kind of manager who'll know how to kind of funnel the ball towards Middlesbrough's left with the sort of strategy that he can kind of put together. So I think Burnley might be able to keep can they keep a clean sheet? I think they might be able to keep a clean sheet against Middlesbrough, with the hope that maybe Latte or Conway might not quite be as clinical as they have been in previous weeks. But it's obviously going to be very difficult to keep the likes of Doak and Azaz quiet as well. But Burnley have been rock solid defensively. Do you know what? I'm going to go with 1-1. Very difficult. I'm struggling, but I'm going to go with 1-1.
I enjoyed that. I think they'll keep a clean sheet, but I'm going 1-1.
It's the expert analysis you get on this show, right?
Yeah.
But I just want to go back to that though. The bit where you said Parker will make a specific plan. That he's the kind of manager that can do that.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between him and Company. I think Parker, for example, when we played Leeds away, we had a specific plan, and I do think there's a blueprint to beat Leeds, as we touched on earlier. And I think Parker knew that, and he managed to do it. So if anyone can do it, I think in these sort of games, and if Parker's good at something, I think even the people that don't particularly like him, it's good at nullifying a football match and nullifying opposition teams. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. But yeah, it's going to be a good game nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to ask you one more question: are Burnley going up?
Yes.
Where, automatically?
It's going to. Second, we'll go up automatically. I think Sheffield United. You know what? I am worried about Leeds. My main worry with Leeds is if they sack Falk, and I think they might start. Yeah, but I don't think they will. I don't think they'll sack him. But there's been some, not unrest, but I know Twitter's not really the best place to gauge opinion. But there's been some sort of like fans calling for his head recently, and I think if Leeds were. You could probably say the same about Burnley, but if Leeds were unleashed slightly and the shackles were taken off, I think they'd do very, very well. Interesting stuff.
I'm bigger on Fark than most people. I think Leeds will be all right. I think Leeds will still probably win the league when their players come back from injury, and we'll see what happens with Sunderland. Gab, I'm not going to let you talk about them this week. It is time now for your corner of concern, though, and a very obvious one, I think, this week.
Yeah, I'm worried about Plymouth Argyle. 6-1 loss at Norwich City, 4-0 loss at Bristol City. It feels like I think in over a quarter of the games they've lost heavily, and it's been a complete no-show. And I think it's very difficult for them to build anything of substance when over a quarter of their games they're just not turning up in, and it's not like they've played well in many of the other ones. I think they've had one or two good performances this season, but it hasn't been at the level. Now, of course, one factor behind that is injuries. It's obviously going to be a lot harder without the likes of Morgan Whittaker and Ibrahim Sissoko, and Captain Joe Edwards is out at the moment, and Gibson was out for a while, I think, as well. So all those things don't make it easy. But I just don't, when I watch Plymouth Argyle, I don't see a real strategy in a lot of games as to how they're going to get from A to B, how they're going to try and create a chance, or how they're going to be competitive, and I feel like they've been far too passive this season, and I think it's getting to the stage where you have to start to ask the bigger questions. Now, of course, on paper, they are 21st, and 21st is an acceptable outcome for Plymouth Argyle from this season, but I don't think, based on what I've seen from them, that's where they're going to finish. I think there's better teams below them. So, yeah, I'm very worried about Plymouth Argyle, and I think the likes of even Simon Hallett, who's been one of the best owners in English football over the last 10 years or so, or 5 years, I think he's a very trusting owner, and I think that can be a massive, massive strength. But I think he's put a lot of trust in Neil Dewsnip, whose managerial appointment since Stephen Schumacher left has left a lot to be desired. And I think there's got to be big questions to be answered at Plymouth Argyle.
Their away form is horrendous. 2 draws, 8 losses, 27 goals conceded. They conceded, was it 4 at Bristol City, 6 at Norwich? I mean, the goals are just flying past them.
5 at Cardiff.
5 at Cardiff, you are right, yeah.
4 Sheffield Wednesday, yeah.
And I think if you looked at the start of the season and you saw them keep one of Michael Cooper or Morgan Whittaker, you'd have probably said, well, Whittaker was incredible last season, we have to probably keep him. But given what Cooper's doing at Sheffield United as well, that seems like a massive error now, doesn't it? I mean, I know the money was good and players want to move on for a reason, but that's going to be a major reason why they get relegated, I think.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, Connor Hazard's been injured recently as well, who's a very good shot stopper, as we saw at QPR back in August. So that sort of thing doesn't help. I think Daniel Grimshaw's okay. But the other thing is, we can talk about, we would have said, before the season, Morgan Whittaker's going to be a massive asset for Plymouth Argyle, and of course they're going to miss him when he's injured, but he hasn't actually really hit the levels that we were expecting from him. So, and again, I think this has to come back to the coaching issue. Of course, I don't know that it's necessarily a great squad that Plymouth Argyle have got, so I can see all the mitigating factors, but I think it comes back to a coaching issue, and I think that it's a club that have gone for PR over genuine coaching ability. And I think actually that's going to put them in the headlines for the wrong reasons rather than the right ones.
It's difficult, isn't it, Joe? Because Wayne Rooney, obviously, massive name. Everyone wants to see how he does. There's people wanting to jump on his back, like with Lampard and Gerrard for some reason. This is difficult because this Plymouth squad is probably a bottom 3 squad. So if they go down, it's not... Rooney's going to be labelled as a failure, but ultimately it's so difficult because at home they look competitive in some games. Away from home, they might as well not turn up.
Yeah, haven't they scored like in the added time in like the last 3 or 4 home games or something like that? Yeah. So they're obviously decent enough to get points at home and stuff. I think Rooney obviously knew how big the job was when he took it on. So I take the point on if they go down, is going to be labelled. He knew that. He knew that relegation was a possibility, and he's probably thought to himself, if I finish 20th, 19th, I can be labelled as now a good manager. But it's looking like, I mean, losing these games 6-1, 4-0, 5-0, whatever it is, that's not acceptable. You can lose games, but don't get spanked every single week. That's not acceptable. I'll be honest, I don't watch Plymouth every single week, obviously. I can just gauge my opinion on the Plymouth podcasters and stuff.
More?
They're actually all right at Turf. We struggled to break them down, if I'm being honest with you. But that was in the early Parker days when we were struggling to break teams down. I don't think we'd score 5 against him, but I think we might do a little bit better against him this year. But yeah, they did look okay at the Turf. But yeah, I do fear for Plymouth, and I agree. I think they're not gone, but I think they'll go.
They are sinking. Rooney needs to address some serious issues if they are to get out of danger. Gab, let's go on to your championship treble. Now it is time. You've got them listed in front of you this week, I think, so it's going to be smoother than usual.
Absolutely, yes. It's been a bit of a difficult one for the 3 o'clock kickoffs because there's not many of the favourites are all playing at different times. But what I've gone with, I think Millwall might beat Coventry. Sorry, Simon, because I back Millwall at home to play at a really high intensity and keep the pressure up. Really like Japhet Tanganga as well. I think Norwich win at QPR. I like Marty Cifuentes, the QPR head coach, but I think they've got lots of problems there. And I think Norwich will win that one, even without Josh Sargent, because of the way they played at the weekend. And I've also got a feeling Portsmouth might be Bristol City, because I think performance-wise, Portsmouth aren't too far away. I think they've been competitive. They've got Colby Bishop now back fit, which has made a massive difference, and they're unbeaten in 4. So Portsmouth to beat Bristol City for me, along with Millwall to beat Coventry and Norwich to beat QPR.
Probably get some decent odds on that, especially given Bristol City coming off the back of a big win. But as you say, you put in the mitigating factor if they played Plymouth, and we might be looking quite good. I'll forgive you for the Millwall to beat Coventry, because we're pretty rubbish as a football team at the minute. So I'll let you off with that one. One final question before we finish for both of you. Which manager in the Championship is going to be full of Christmas spirit, and which is going to be a Grinch over the festive period? So who's into their Christmas in the Championship, and who's a bit nonplussed by it? How's Parker acting over Christmas?
Well, obviously this is our first season with Parker, but you just know for a fact he's sat there with the family with a turtleneck jumper on, absolutely loving it, carving the turkey. You know he's at the top of the table. You know, and I love some of the stuff that he wears. Like, he comes into press conferences, like I say, with like a proper grandad, twirly turtleneck, and then he's wearing these jackets. I think I alluded to it last time on the show. He's wearing these jackets that are like $4.5 grand. And
is he going to advertise the range for the club shop? Do you think, Joe?
You know, he should do. That's actually a very good shout. They actually use Mike Trezor to do the latest thing. And I'm like, oh, he exists. I forgot about him. But yeah, they should bring out like a Parker turtleneck. That'd absolutely, I'm going to say fly off the shelves. I don't think it would so much in Burnley, if I'm honest with you. I know I wouldn't want it. But yeah, I just have a feeling he's sat there in an absolutely brilliant jumper and just dominating the table, carving the turkey and making sure everyone's all right.
He's going to be opening something special on Christmas Day, and he'll turn up on Boxing Day wearing something magic.
I tell you what, Parker's going to be the one that makes sure everyone's sitting in the right places, isn't he?
Very organised. What about you, Gab? Who do you reckon?
I think it's going to be the Santa, if you like, in this analogy, is going to be Michael Carrick, because I think he's found a lovely formula at Middlesbrough in the last few weeks, and I think he thinks that he's going to be a coach that thinks outside the box in terms of Christmas presents. But
I think that
there's something there. The pieces are there. You put that together. And the Grinch, unfortunately, I think might be Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to say Rooney. He's just going to be in a bit of a bad mood over Christmas, isn't he? If he's still in a job. I mean, he might be in a better mood if he's been relieved of his duties. I'm not sure because they don't have to worry about
There's
relegation.
got to be a Green Army link there as well, hasn't
Yeah,
there?
Yeah,
fair
good
enough.
shout. Yeah,
There we go.
nice.
That's exactly what we intended.
I tell you what, Boxing Day, Frank Lampard versus Wayne Rooney. That's a Christmas treat for us all, isn't it? And then we can look forward to that. But for now, that is it, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Get your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, thank you very much, Joe, for joining. Thanks, Gab, as usual. But we'll see you next week on the Sportsman Untitled.